of October 5th, 28 days until early voting begins, and Election Day is in 56 days. Of course, it's now officially after Labor Day, so that also means we got to put the seersucker suits away and no more white shoes. Of course, here to talk today about our preparations for Election Day, making sure that we're all ready to go. Absentee ballot requests have gone out, and as you all know, we sent those to 7.8 million registered voters. Hopefully, you all have gotten yours, and we believe that they've all hit at this point, but there may be still a few trickling out. But every registered voter either has or will soon receive an absentee ballot request in the mail. Lauren and I got ours last week. We promptly filled them out and mailed them back in. And then I actually went to the Franklin County Board of Elections ballot tracking service and signed up for an email alert so that they'll email me once they get my ballot, request, that is. It's important to talk about some of the common mistakes that voters make when they're filling these out. And so these are things that we have worked to try to mitigate by redesigning the form and improving the layout of the form. But some things that people do from time to time, and this is what we're hearing from the boards of elections, not necessarily yet from this round, but in the past, simply forgetting to sign the application. Of course, it requires a valid signature. Using today's date instead of your birth date, that's another common mistake that happens on these forms, and so something else to think about. And of course, the biggest mistake is waiting too long to send in your application. We're trying to encourage Ohioans to get in their application right away. Of course, it's important also to include your email address and phone number, and that's always been, in recent years anyway, a component of the form. But one of the reasons why that's so important is if you do make a mistake, we've directed the boards of elections now to call you or email you to correct it. In not too distant past, there was a procedure where they would mail you something and you'd have to wait for that to get back, and by then the time may run out. Now, as long as you put your email address or cell phone number on there, the board can contact you electronically. They can get the process underway of getting that remedied, and that's important for people to know and make sure that they can get that done. We're seeing a lot of requests coming in, and that's a good thing. A lot of those requests are coming in as a result of the statewide absentee ballot request mailing that we sent out. But we've also heard from a couple boards of elections that people are sending in duplicate requests. You only need to send in one absentee ballot request. Of course, if you want to know for sure that the board has gotten your request, you can go to voteohio.gov, go to the website and track your ballot, and you'll see if the board has received your request, and you'll know, of course, that it's in. And then I think a lot of people, too, don't realize yet that the ballots don't go out until October 6th. And so we've had some questions from people say, well, I mailed in my absentee ballot request 2 weeks ago. Well, of course, according to the Ohio Revised Code, those ballots cannot start going out until October 6th. And so the message loud and clear should be submit your absentee ballot request, but you only need to submit one of those. And don't burden the Board of Elections by sending duplicate or triplicate requests in. It's important to always emphasize the security of absentee voting. The way that we do it here in Ohio is safe and secure. Those safeguards have been in place for close to 20 years, and that's why Ohioans know that they can trust it. Of course, there are two separate checkpoints that happen when you confirm your identity. The Board of Elections confirms your signature and checks the identifying information that you provide. Of course, you have to put down your name and address, date of birth, one of the acceptable forms of identification. Those identifiers are again confirmed twice, once when you send in the absentee ballot request, and then again when you actually send in your ballot. So it's important to emphasize that. Next up, it's important to know that those absentee ballot request forms will continue to go out. First, our office just sent out 7.8 million, but we're going to do another 2 rounds of them, because what we want to make sure of is that everybody that gets registered to vote between now and October 5th has the chance to receive that absentee ballot request. Also know, though, that other groups will be sending out absentee ballot requests, and that's completely legal for them to do. We ask them, though, to use the official form provided by the Ohio Secretary of State's office, and if they have any questions, they should contact us. This means campaigns, political parties, ideological groups, whoever it may be that wants to send out absentee ballot requests to their universe of people, they should check with us and make sure that they get the form right. It's an important thing to do, and to make sure that Ohioans can, if they receive that form from an outside group, that they have the information that they're supposed to have. Again, upcoming dates to know: October 5th is the voter registration deadline. The boards of elections will be open late that night. We'll be doing the final push, obviously, between now and then. You've seen a variety of the different things that we're doing, everything from the partnership with barbershops and beauty salons to our work with the Ohio Craft Brewers Association. We're working to get as many people as we can registered. In fact, we also were able to get a list together of what we call EBU, eligible but unregistered, and send them a postcard. So we're trying to do all we can to get as many people registered to vote. Of course, that deadline comes up October 5th. October 6th is when early voting begins, and that's a date that we're all excited about, excited for Ohioans to start having the opportunity to cast their ballots. And then effectively, we are setting October 27th as the deadline for requesting your absentee ballot. As you all know, the law says that you may continue to request absentee ballots up until the Saturday before election at noon. That's a terrible idea. We're telling everyone that as far as we're concerned, the logistical deadline, the realistic deadline is the 27th of October, and really should not request an absentee ballot after that, because the chances are that you'll get it on Wednesday or Thursday after the election's over. Next, moving on to postage paid for absentee ballots. We are making another push for this. This is something I've been working on for some time, and of course the decision will now come at the controlling board meeting on September 14th. This is not a new ask for us. This is late in the cycle, and we would love to have had this back in April when we first started asking. We've been asking throughout the summer, tried a variety of different things, whether it was to use CARES Act dollars or whether it was to use money from the state budget, and then now, of course, I've been able to identify $3 million out of my office's own budget, and we're trying this through the controlling board, and I sincerely hope that they offer this opportunity to Ohioans. This is completely consistent with what we did in the primary. In the primary, the decision was made that because we're having voting in the midst of a pandemic, that we want to encourage people to vote absentee. We want to make it easy for people to vote absentee, take away any hesitation or doubt, and this is just a logical continuation of that same policy. It's something that we absolutely should do, and obviously doesn't have any impact on state or federal budgeting. It's money that's coming out of my office's budget, and money that's actually coming from fees that my office has collected. It's also important to mention that this doesn't have any particular partisan impact. From everything anybody can tell, this is something that once people have requested their absentee ballot, simply providing the postage so that there aren't questions about how many stamps go on it or that kind of thing. And also, so people send their absentee ballots in without delay. If they have the postage paid envelope, our belief is that they will send it in sooner. We want them to send it in sooner. We don't want these to sit on people's kitchen tables or counters for days and days on end. And one way to encourage people to send them in sooner, of course, is to provide that postage page. And again, really no partisan impact in any particular way. Also important to mention that when we provide postage paid absentee ballot returns through the Secretary of State's office, it is a statewide endeavor. This is something that's come up a couple times, and the law right now, the law in the state of Ohio, forbids county boards of elections from including postage paid. If you all remember the history on that, when the legislature enacted that change, there was one county that was trying to provide postage paid envelopes, and that would have meant that the other 87 counties don't get that. And so the legislature stepped in to say, no, county boards of elections cannot provide postage paid for absentee ballot return envelopes. Well, at the time, the state legislature could have also prohibited the Secretary of State from doing that, but they didn't, because the obvious logic was that if you're going to do this, it has to be done on a statewide basis, not a county-by-county basis, because of equal protection and that kind of thing. And so it is clearly within the legal purview of the Secretary of State to provide postage, so long as I can receive that controlling board authorization. Of course, an expenditure in that amount would does require controlling board authorization, and that's exactly why we're going for that. Another argument that I've heard some make, and I think maybe just uninformed on this one, is to say that if we provide postage paid, it somehow could slow down the process. In fact, to the contrary, it'll speed up the process. There have been folks that have said, well, if it's a business reply envelope, for example, those don't get a postmark. False, 100% false. Business reply mail does get a postmark. I've had others say that if it's business reply mail, it doesn't move as fast. That's false as well. Those are treated as first-class postage. I've got that confirmation directly from the U.S. Postmaster General and others within the U.S. Postal Service. But it's also important to mention that at this late date, because we haven't gotten this authorization as early as we should have gotten it, if the state legislature through the controlling board does authorize this on September 14th, what we're going to be doing is providing first-class postage stamps to the boards of elections. I mean, at this point, it's too late for printing envelopes and that kind of thing, so we will just be providing first-class postage stamps, boxes of them, in the rolls, just like what we're all accustomed to for those county boards of elections. So clearly, again, there is no reasonable argument against doing this. It is a first-class postage stamp. It gets the postmark. It moves fast through the postal system because it is first class, and it helps encourage people to return their absentee ballot. It's also important to mention that this is supported by both Republicans and Democrats. I know recently a county Republican Party weighed in support of it. There's a long history on this. When Bob Bennett was Ohio Republican chairman, he was a longtime supporter of this particular public policy to require or to allow postage paid on the return of absentee ballots. And it's, of course, supported by the Ohio Association of Elections Officials, and these are the people that know best. These are the men and women who have devoted their lives to running elections in Ohio. This bipartisan group, the Ohio Association of Elections Officials, is very supportive of this. And again, I think it's important for the legislature to learn to listen to the Ohio Association of Elections Officials who really have one interest, and that's making sure that Ohioans can have a fair election. Next, poll worker tracking. This is something that we came up with several months ago. The idea being that we wanted to create very transparent situation as it relates to where we are. Bad news doesn't get better with time, and if a county is behind on their poll worker recruitment efforts, then we need to know that so that we can surge resources to them, help them out, so that they can step up their game. And so this is really what this is all about. The idea was that we need the county boards of elections to have their poll workers all lined up and finalized sooner in the process than we would in the past. And every county has different needs. Candidly, there are certain counties where they have plenty of Republicans but not enough Democrats, and some counties where they have plenty of Democrats and not enough Republicans. Those are things that people need to be aware of so that we can help them with their poll worker recruitment efforts that they have going underway. This is about encouraging these counties to contact their poll workers ASAP and get them all lined up. And as you've seen, we've had an unprecedented effort underway for poll worker recruitment. It's been a thing that we've focused on. We've got 5 very innovative tools that we have rolled out. These toolkits provide social media graphics, template letters, animations, videos, GIFs, posters they can print out, flyers they can print out. The 5 basic programs are Youth at the Booth for 17-year-old poll workers, Give a Day for Democracy, which is to encourage Ohio businesses to provide their employees a day off to be poll workers. Next is Second Call to Duty. This one's near and dear to my heart. This is encouraging veterans to continue keeping their oath of enlistment by serving in a new way as a poll worker. The next one is Work a Day, Donate Your Pay. A lot of charity groups are struggling to do their traditional fundraiser because it would involve a gathering of people. And so in this environment, one way to do a fundraiser is to get a bunch of members of your nonprofit group to sign up to be poll workers and then in turn commit to donating their poll worker salary back to the institution. And then finally, professional licensure. A number of groups out there have expressed an interest in this. So far, the Ohio Supreme Court has stepped up and awarded lawyers continuing education credits for signing up to be poll workers. And the Accountancy Board has done the same for CPAs, and we believe that there will be others in short order that will be signing up as well. So again, a lot of different things that we can do on poll worker recruitment. Now it's just key for the boards of elections to use those tools to get out there and do their poll worker recruiting. If you notice the spreadsheet that we made here, obviously this is a little bit too small to see on here, but if you go to our website, you see we break down each category. There's the bare minimum number of poll workers needed. You all have heard me talk about we need over 35,000 poll workers. That's the bare minimum just to open the polling locations. Of course, we've told the boards of elections that they need to be at 50% above that, so they have that reserve force trained and ready to go. And so we lay out the bare minimum. We lay out the projected what we want to get to as far as having that full-fledged reserve force of poll workers. recruited and trained, and then we break it down by county and show how far along they are. And so it will be evident in the next weeks to come which county boards of elections are ready to go and which ones are lagging behind. And again, that kind of transparency and accountability is important. Next, you're going to move on to the public service announcement that we've created. This has been past practice in Ohio as well. We wanted to make sure to get this out there early. We've been working with the Ohio Association of Broadcasters, and we're encouraging all of your stations to play this as well. And as you can see, we created just a very simple message. And Sarah, would you go ahead and share that?
The November 3rd election is quickly approaching, and Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose is sending an official absentee ballot request to every registered voter. But don't wait. With more Ohioans planning to vote absentee than ever, now is the time to submit your request. Polls will be open on Election Day, but you can use absentee voting as a safe and secure way to avoid Election Day crowds. Make sure you're registered to vote or get registered at voteohio.gov. Sponsored by the Ohio Secretary of State, aired by OAB and the station.
As you can see, we got a lot of different ideas into that. The main point is to get your absentee ballot request in, to get it in early, to not delay. Of course, there's a voter registration message in there as well. And then there's also a reinforcement of, if you really prefer in-person voting, you've got both early voting and in-person election day voting as well. And so expect to see that playing throughout Ohio, and we're going to keep sharing it. Next up is election night and what to expect. This has been a topic of great discussion nationally. It's important for Ohioans to understand. First of all, as you all know, and this is important for us to emphasize, the unofficial results that we report on election night are just that, always have been, unofficial results. This year they may be a little bit more unofficial than usual because we know that we're going to see a record number of absentee ballots, and those absentee ballots, as long as they're legally cast and postmarked by November 2nd, can continue to be received at the Board of Elections up to 10 days later. We know that the boards of elections then go through the process for certifying those ballots and certifying the final result of the election. And so the numbers will change between election night and the final certification. That's not a sign of something nefarious happening. In fact, quite the contrary. It's the sign that the system is working the way it's supposed to. When we say that every voice matters and so every vote should count, that's exactly what we mean. And whether it's one of my teammates, former teammates who's serving abroad and needs to cast his or her ballot absentee from a combat zone, for example, or whether it's one of our fellow Ohioans who simply waits until the very last minute and sends in their absentee ballot on November 2nd, we believe that every one of those deserves to be counted, and so they will be counted as long as they're legally cast. But that means that there will be a difference between what's reported on election night and what we report weeks later. It's also important to mention that Ohio has an advantage over several other states in the way that we handle these. Our boards of elections can begin processing the absentee ballots as soon as they arrive at the Board of Elections. And so that means even beginning October 6th or 7th, as those first wave of absentee ballots come in, the boards of elections can cut open the envelope, verify the information, check the signature. They can flatten them out, which actually is a process. They've got to flatten the folds out of them, and then they can start scanning them. They just don't tabulate them. In fact, in many cases, what you're going to see at 7:45 and 8 as those first results on election night are those absentee ballots, because really the in-person election day precinct ballots are not even back at the Board of Elections. They're on their way back down to the board at that point. And so it's important for people to understand that. I've directed my team to reconfigure the way that the election night reporting website works. And I wanted to be very intentional about this. So let me be clear. Our team is redesigning the way our election night reporting website works so that we very prominently report the number of outstanding absentee ballots. So that's a knowable number. What that means is that on election night, we're going to tabulate results. We're going to release those results. We're going to do it in as timely a way as possible. We're going to be, I think ahead of many other states, especially those states that I was just mentioning that can't even cut open envelopes until election day. And then once we report those results, whether it's late Wednesday night or Tuesday night, late Wednesday morning rather, or early Wednesday morning or late Tuesday night, we are going to report those results, but we're also going to report the number of outstanding ballots. And what that means is that there will be tens, probably hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots that are still out that we expect to come back, at least some large portion of those we expect to come back. And we're going to report what that number is. And so it'll be very clear to everybody that these are the results that we have so far, but it's not the final result because there's still a high number of ballots that are likely out. Of course, when final results are expected, election night results are always those unofficial results, and the official results happen weeks later, just over 3 weeks later, as a matter of fact, when we hit the statutory requirement for when the boards have to submit those to us. Finally, on disinformation, and this is something that I think you all hear me talk about pretty much every time we have the chance to get together. This is the season when we all need to be vigilant. We know that we face foreign adversaries as well as others that want to spread false information. There are a lot of things on the internet that are dubious. We try to debunk those when we can. All of you need to be vigilant about that as well. We know that one of the tactics that foreign adversaries in particular use is they'll target credentialed journalists, try to get them to report something that's false, and then they'll use that as a validation of their false information. And so you all need to be more vigilant than ever about making sure that you're not yourself a victim of disinformation. And of course, if you suspect that there is disinformation occurring pertaining to elections, we ask you to report it to us. report@ohiosos.gov is that email address, report@ohiosos.gov. This is something that we take very seriously. And again, making sure that accurate information is available for Ohioans is among my top responsibilities. And let me end with that. Ohioans have 3 really good choices. As far as how they vote this November, there are 3 really good choices. 4 weeks of early voting, 4 weeks of absentee voting, and safe and secure in-person election day voting. All 3 choices work well. Ohioans simply should pick the one that works best for them. All are secure. Ohioans should simply choose the one that they're most comfortable with, and then they should cast their ballot. And then we will report those results in as timely a manner as possible. And as you can see, this is something that we take very seriously. So with that, happy to take any questions that you all may have for me. We've got microphones left and right. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask, the president has said and also tweeted the notion of people should go ahead and cast an absentee ballot by mail and then show up on election day. I wanted to get your response on if that would be allowed in Ohio, what Ohioans should do, and what your thoughts are on him pushing this notion that that's what Ohioans should do.
Yeah, that's not something Ohioans should do. Ohioans should know that they're only going to be allowed to vote once. They shouldn't try to vote multiple times. The boards of elections keep very diligent track of that. Once you're sent an absentee ballot, for example, that's annotated. If you go and vote early, that's annotated. And if you were to try to vote a second time, if there's intentionality, there may actually be, a cause for criminal prosecution to it. It's certainly something that you shouldn't do. You should vote once. You should track your ballot by going to voteohio.gov. And once you go to voteohio.gov, you can make sure that the Board of Elections received your absentee ballot, for example, and then you can rest assured that you've done your duty and cast your ballot. And at that point, sign up to be a poll worker because you've already voted, and you can help us out on Tuesday, November 3rd.
Just to follow up on that, good morning. So if an Ohio voter should follow that advice that the president gave, would their in-person vote be provisional, and then which one of those votes would be counted?
Yeah. So the question is, if you have voted absentee, for example, and then you show up for early voting or you show up for election day voting, what would happen is they would check you in, you would show your ID, and it would come up on the poll book that you had already voted. They would say, well, according to this, you've already cast an absentee ballot. If you say, oh, well, okay, and turn around and leave, then transaction's complete. But if you insist that you want to vote again, at that point, the only way to do that would be to cast a provisional ballot. They would give you a provisional ballot. It goes in a separate envelope. It gets put to the side. And then after Election Day, the Board of Elections would, make sure that only one of those was counted. And it would be the first one that you submitted. Your absentee ballot would be the official ballot that you submitted. At that point, the provisional ballot is a spoiled ballot. It doesn't get counted. It's invalid. And so again, don't test our boards of elections. They're good at this. Go ahead and submit your ballot once. Vote absentee. Check your status online to make sure it's been received. And again, then you've completed your responsibilities.
And just one quick follow-up on that. Would something like the president said about that be part of your disinformation process in terms of trying to take steps to counteract that in some way?
You know, what I'm trying to do is make sure that I put out as much accurate information as possible. What I'm more so talking about when we're talking about reporting disinformation is where there's a paid and persistent effort or an organized effort online to spread false information intentionally. Certainly, public officials misspeak from time to time. That's you know, or say something that needs to be corrected. We will make sure to put accurate information out there, but certainly that doesn't fall in the disinformation protocol that our office has set up, but it does fall into the category of, I guess, what you would call misinformation, right? Where something incorrect was said, and it's my responsibility as Secretary of State to make sure Ohioans know the facts, and that is vote once and your vote will be counted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Hey, Rick.
On your poll worker tracker, two boards of elections show that they have not gotten any poll workers committed to this point. Given all the circumstances that you've laid out, is there any plans from your office to take any action with those boards or others that might be behind the curve on recruiting poll workers?
So what you're saying is that according to the tracker, there are two boards of elections that report that they have not recruited any poll workers yet?
Medina and Preble, I believe.
I'll have to look into that. I don't think that that's the case. I think that that's probably a mistake if that's what it says. I don't think that there's any board of elections in the state that has recruited 0 poll workers at this point. Certainly if there are, that's a problem. But we're working with all the county boards of elections. We created this poll worker recruitment task force over a year and a half ago when I first came into office. Long before anybody was thinking about or talking about a pandemic, we put together a group from all over the state that represents the great diversity of Ohio, and we've been working with that group of elections officials very closely. And I can tell you that every board of elections I've talked to takes this task very seriously. In fact, many of them are nearing, they're really pushing to get this done here in the next couple of weeks. So I'll have to look into that, Rick.
Thanks.
Yep.
Secretary, at this point in time, do you have the votes, do you believe, for the controlling board request? Do you not have it, or do you not know at this point?
Sorry, one more time.
Yeah, do you have the votes for the controlling board request? Do you not have the votes, or do you not know at this point?
Yeah, so as far as the controlling board request, we're still pushing for it. Again, I know that it's going to be an ongoing effort to get that. I wouldn't say that I'm resting yet on that. I'm going to continue pushing for the members of the controlling board to consider this very thoughtful, simple public policy. Again, very consistent with what they did back in the primary. There's absolutely no good reason not to do this. And I've yet to hear any reasonable cause not to do this, and especially given that it's money simply out of my office's budget. It doesn't affect the state budget. It doesn't affect the federal budget. It's simply smart, good public policy.
On the same note of the controlling board, we're getting much closer to the point where ballots will be going out, and you've said that you can't pay for some of the ballots and not pay for every ballot to have prepaid postage. Are we getting too close to that deadline where ballots will be going out, or do you still believe that your office would be able to get stamps to all the county boards?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that we're in this position, right? Because again, this is something we've been asking for since the spring, early spring, really. It's logistically possible to get this done, but it's going to be tight. We've already been talking with our boards of elections. The boards of elections, by the way, support this through their state association because they know that it's important. They know it's going to be extra work, but they're willing to do that extra work because it's important that we get this done. To be clear, if we do it for one voter, we do it for every voter, and so we're going to make sure that every absentee voter in the state gets that opportunity to have the postage-paid return envelope. And that's something that we're going to have to push to get done. I mean, we've heard creative ideas from boards of elections where maybe they even partner with their local MRDD workshop and have those folks helping to put stamps on envelopes. And that'll be, the process that they have to undertake. Again, this is tough work running elections, but it's worth doing, and providing that postage paid will help Ohioans return their absentee ballot that much quicker. It'll take away any question about whether they need one stamp or two. It'll also, by the way, effectively make every mailbox in the state a drop box, right? This idea about should we have drop boxes and that kind of thing. If we have postage paid on the absentee ballot return envelopes, then whether it's the one at the end of your driveway or the one stuck to your front porch or the blue box down the street, every mailbox in the state becomes a drop box. Again, because Ohio allows those to be received up to 10 days later, as long as they're postmarked by November 2nd. So, good news. Yeah.
Some have described this so-called nightmare scenario in which the candidates claim victory on election night and then the total changes at the end and it throws the whole process into question and voters don't accept either one. Should candidates declare a victory on election night, or should they wait until 10 days later? And how vigorously is it your office's job to kind of tamp that down, that those claims of a victory when it's not exactly clear if that's the case?
Yeah. So I think you're right to say that that is a nightmare scenario, particularly if the results are very close. The old elections official's prayer is, Lord, whoever wins, let them win big, right? And so we know that that's not always the case here in Ohio. We know that we've had some tight margins in the past. Ohioans make you earn your victory. Nobody gets an easy ride here. I'd say this: the reason why we are reporting how many absentee ballots are yet outstanding is that it makes that calculation that'll be abundantly clear. Listen. If some candidate wins by 4 or 5 or 6% in Ohio and there's only a couple 100,000 outstanding absentee ballots, then the chances are that we know what the final result's going to be. But if it's a close margin and you see that large number of absentee ballots that are yet outstanding, then candidates should be sanguine about making those kind of pronouncements. Again, it's always the unofficial result on election night. We've gotten very accustomed to sort of knowing who's going to be the next president before we go to bed on election night. That may not be the case this year. What I can tell you that in Ohio, we're going to report those results as quickly as we can, but more important than speed is always accuracy. So we're going to report those results accurately. But again, that'll just be a snapshot on November 3rd. The final result comes weeks later. And you're right, if it's a really tight margin, it would be a bad idea for candidates to declare a victory in a really tight margin scenario like that.
A question that I get sometimes is whether a certain party voter is more likely to vote by mail or not. So in the scenario you're talking about, it could be very pivotal. Do you have, based on the questions that you get and the information you guys have, do you think that there's a particular party that's more likely to vote by mail, or how do you view kind of like the partisan breakdown of who's more likely to vote how?
Yeah, historically in Ohio, we've seen absentee voting adopted pretty uniformly by both Republicans and Democrats. Candidly, one of the concerns I have is that because of a lot of the rhetoric about absentee voting this year, it could cause people to not want to do that, even though in Ohio it is a safe and secure process. That's why we've been trying to reemphasize it. That's why our PSA emphasized the security of absentee voting and the convenience of absentee voting. I'm of the belief that both Republicans and Democrats really do trust it in Ohio. And I know that historically they've used it in equal numbers. I don't think that there's a partisan advantage one way or another with absentee voting. It just doesn't seem to play out that way to me.
Thanks.
Yep.
Can you just comment a little bit on voter drop boxes? I know there's been a lot of chatter about that this cycle and a lot of groups that are hoping for an expansion of that. But besides just this election, is that something your office might be looking into expanding for future elections, or is that something you're leaving up to the legislature to decide?
Yeah, so not going to get into that. Obviously, there's pending litigation on that. I have spoken publicly about the public policy of that, and those will be my comments for now on the whole Dropbox question. Rick?
Yeah, the Associated Press had a report that said that in battleground states that absentee ballot rejections could triple in this election. They included Ohio in that. Is that something that you are concerned about? And is your office doing anything to ensure that fewer absentee ballots are rejected?
So again, I was having trouble hearing I think you were saying the rejection rate of absentee ballots. Okay, so it's important for Ohioans to take their time when they fill that form out. The good news though is we've redesigned the form to make it easier, both the application form, by the way, and the return envelope when you send in your absentee ballot. The most common mistake again is a signature that's missing. Obviously that's a binary question. Is there a signature on there or not? Does the signature match? I can tell you that the boards of elections very seldom disqualify a ballot for mismatching signature, and when they do disqualify a ballot for a signature match question, it's always a bipartisan vote of that county board of elections to do that. Again, I think in 2016 there was something like 700 statewide in the whole election, and so the signature mismatch is an uncommon reason, but it's something, it's an important safeguard that exists. One of the other common mistakes that happens is people will put today's date instead of their date of birth. That's thing that, again, we've highlighted right there on the form, that date is one for people to pay attention to. We redesigned the instruction sheet. We worked with a group called the Center for Civic Design. These are the form gurus that study sort of government forms and how to make them clearer, more intuitive. And so we redesigned the entire form, both for the absentee application and for, again, returning your absentee ballot. But this is also why it's important for Ohioans to put down their email address and their phone number. We're asking Ohioans to do that because I've directed the boards of elections, and again, I think this is this is something that's noteworthy here. I've directed the boards of elections that if they have a problem, they should call the voter or email the voter and get it rectified. And they can do that over the phone. They may still have to mail something to the Board of Elections, but it's not going to delay the process. We've directed them to go ahead and carry out the cure over the phone, and then then receive the paper copy that has to come by mail after that. And so that's why it's important to put your name or put your address and phone number on there so that we can fix it. We don't want to see any ballots rejected, but the fact is the law is very black and white on this too. When certain elements are missing, we cannot accept the ballot. When the signature is missing, you can't accept the ballot. The standards are pretty straightforward as it relates to that. Yes, sir.
2 or 3 weeks ago, the Postmaster General announced he was not going to take some of the actions he had planned to take as far as removing some of the sorting machines, the blue drop boxes, et cetera, et cetera. Does that give you any cause to breathe a little easier or any sense of relief as we head into election season and absentee ballot season?
So that was the right decision that the Postmaster General made. I spoke with him just a few days later as part of a bipartisan group of Secretaries of State. The leadership from the National Association of Secretaries of State got on the phone with the Postmaster General, and we actually have a subsequent call with him coming up in a few more days where we're going to have all of the Secretaries of State, all of the chief elections officers in each respective state on the phone with the Postmaster General. I can say this, it was the right decision for him to make. Any large organization like the U.S. Postal Service probably needs updates and changes and efficiency improvements from time to time, but disruptive changes right before an election, disruptive changes in the midst of a pandemic right before an election, really bad idea. And those are changes that thankfully have been delayed. Now they'll carry those changes out next year if they decide to carry them out. So that was the right choice. I can tell you this too. We've seen good results recently from the Postal Service. Our absentee ballot request form, I didn't think those would start hitting until after Labor Day, candidly. And most people have already received theirs at this point. I mean, I think most of us around the room here have already gotten our absentee ballot request form in the mail. And so the Postal Service seems to be keeping their promise as far as treating elections mail as first-class mail, anything with that official elections-related logo. We've told the U.S. Postal Service that we expect them to carry out the plan that they've laid out as far as running what's called an all-clear procedure, where they have to go through each sort facility each night and make sure any elections-related mail is out the door. We expect the U.S. Postal Service to engage in that hand-to-hand delivery where they establish a relationship with their local Board of Elections and their local postmaster, and they work closely together. I've heard of, in recent days, that boards of elections and the local post office are exchanging cell phone numbers so they can get a hold of each other after hours. That's that kind of cooperation that we want to see, and so that's happening. That's good news. Now, we'll hold the Postal Service accountable. We'll hold them accountable to actually be that service that was established at our nation's founding as part of the important process for carrying out elections.
Did you think it was did you think it was any kind of a partisan effort to affect the election, the changes that the Postmaster General had proposed?
Absolutely not. I don't think so. From what I can tell, the Postmaster General was brought in to be an efficiency expert to try to improve the efficiency of the organization, and that's what he was trying to do. I can tell you that what he told me over the phone and others was that elections mail is the top priority for the U.S. Postal Service. He didn't qualify that. He didn't say elections mail is one of the top priorities for the U.S. Postal Service. He says this agency's top priority is elections mail. And again, now it's just going to be up to us to hold him accountable to actually be true to that.
What's the issue with the controlling board when you have conversations with them? Do they have a policy disagreement that this is necessary? Or, you mentioned things like speed, and in the past they've cited the costs and stuff like that, but is it a policy issue that you think is holding this up?
Yeah. Every argument I've heard against it so far has been based on false premises or misunderstandings, right? The first argument I heard against it was, well, you don't have the legal authority to do this. Even if we authorize you the money, you don't have the legal authority to do that. That's 100% false. Again, when the legislature 10 years ago enacted a prohibition on county boards of elections sending out ballots with postage paid on them, they were doing that to prevent a county from doing it to the exclusion of the other counties, because obviously that would create a disparate situation or equal protection problem where one county has the ability to send them out and others do not. The legislature at that time prohibited counties from providing postage paid, did not prohibit the secretary from providing postage paid, because obviously if the Secretary of State does it, it's going to be a statewide endeavor. And that's exactly what this would be. So the legal argument for this is solid. I have the authority to do this. I have no question in my mind that I have the authority to do this so long as they authorize the expenditure, which is what the controlling board has to do. The next argument that came up from some against this was, well, that they wouldn't get a postmark. That's 100% false as well for two reasons. First of all, even if it was the business reply envelope, those get postmarked, okay? But this won't be the business reply envelope. I think in almost all cases, we're gonna just be providing those postage stamps that will be used on those envelopes. So that was the second argument, completely false. The third argument was that they wouldn't move as fast as first class if they were the business reply. And again, that's 100% false as well. Business reply mail is handled as first class. In fact, anything that originates from a consumer, from a citizen, is handled as first class mail. Again, that's off the table entirely, because what we're using is we're actually physically putting stamps on envelopes when we mail these out. So I've not heard any reasonable policy argument against it from anybody on the controlling board. Now, if there's other motivations, I don't know what those may be. I'm open to the conversation. I know that the governor and the lieutenant governor continue to be supportive of this, as they've expressed to me. They've long been supportive of this. And again, the legislature did this very thing back in April for the primary. When they decided that the election should be concluded as an all-postal primary, they provided that postage paid, and that's a good thing, and I think that we should do it again.
Yes, on the election night issue, we all know that midnight on election night isn't really a thing. We've all sat up late at night waiting for results from certain counties. Sometimes it's a single county, sometimes it's a lot of counties. I think the issue that people are worried about this year is that the unofficial result can't even be reported. And I'm just wondering, are you going to set any kind of deadline on how long ballots can be counted in order to release the unofficial result? And are you against the idea of any intermediary reporting on results before the official deadline?
I guess as it relates to the last question, I'm not going to prohibit anybody from reporting what they want to report. I mean, I can't do that. That's a simple question of First Amendment free speech and freedom of the press for a journalist to report whatever they want to report. What I'll say, though, is that, and I think that's what you were talking about as far as that question goes.
The boards, whether the boards will have some window from election day to the official date where they're unable to say anything.
That's actually prohibited by state law. So they're not allowed to, so say on Thursday after the election, they couldn't update you on how many ballots they've gotten and counted so far. There's a legal prohibition in state law against that. So the only time you're going to get reports are, we will report that unofficial canvass on election night, and we're going to emphasize that is whether that's late on election night or whenever it is. I think I'm going to predict that before the sun comes up Wednesday morning, we'll have the results, right? That's about as far as I'm willing to commit on that. But we will report those results on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and then the next time you're going to hear results is going to be over 3 weeks later when the final canvass is certified, right? And so those are the only two times that you can have election results reported. Again, we'll never sacrifice speed for accuracy, or never sacrifice accuracy for speed.
So if it went into Wednesday or Thursday of that week, and would that be okay, or you just are going to be encouraging them to have it all counted by morning?
I'm sorry, one more time?
You're saying that it'll be before the sun rises on Wednesday, but that's obviously, that's not a legal thing. That's just sort of what everybody wants. We all want that, but how long could that unofficial count go, I guess?
So here's what we will have. When the polls close at 7:30 on election night, you're going to hear reported hours later, hopefully not too many hours later, all the ballots that we currently have in hand, right? So all the ballots that have been received throughout the early voting period, throughout the absentee voting period, and on election day. Up until when the polls close on 7:30, at 7:30 on election night, we're going to report everything that we have at that point. Weeks later is when you're going to find out how many provisional ballots came in that were actually counted, and how many trailing absentee ballots continued to arrive on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. But we can't report those numbers until the final certification of the final canvass, again, over 3 weeks after the election. Those are the two. And so yes, if it's within a fraction of a percent or whatever else, that could make for a very difficult scenario. Let's hope that's not the case.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? All right. Thanks, everybody.